Hi, everyone. My name is Will Miller. As was mentioned, I'm a 2014 grad and a former resident of Knott Hall. And while I was here at Notre Dame, I spent a ton of my time thinking about the question, what should I go do with my life? And in my experience, if you're a senior in college and you don't know what you want to do with your life, you go into consulting because that's the only place that will actually take you. And so I found that my journey kind of after Notre Dame took me from Notre Dame to Bain & Company and eventually to Stanford Business School. But along the way, I had some extraordinary opportunities to use what I was learning in the private sector to really try and make a difference in the nonprofit sector at a number of different nonprofits. And the one that I want to focus on today is a little bit of work that I did with the Archdiocese of Chicago back in 2016 and 2017. So looking back to 2010, the Archdiocese of Chicago was on the verge of bankruptcy after years of really challenging management. And it was at that time that a group of business leaders in Chicago, almost exclusively led by Notre Dame alums, launched an effort to save the Archdiocese from bankruptcy and restore it to health. And so in 2010, they launched this initiative, and 5 or 6 years later, they had stabilized the finances, but they actually had not made much of a dent in restoring the faith of the Archdiocese, of evangelizing people, of actually restoring the health of parishes. And so they launched a program known as Renew My Church, which was an attempt to imagine what the Archdiocese of Chicago can look like 10 years from now, 20 years from now, and make sure that the Catholic faith would still continue to be strong in Chicago for years to come. And this focused on making sure that we had strong parishes led by strong priests, and we were really evangelizing the communities in which we served. And I had the extraordinary opportunity at that time to take 6 months off from work to come and lead the piece of that work that was focused on Catholic schools. And Catholic schools in Chicago have had a really rough go of it over the course of the last 50 years. Enrollment in Chicago in Catholic schools has fallen from almost 300,000 in the 1960s to only 80,000 students today. So the focus of my work was spending 6 months interviewing parents and students and teachers and principals and board members and priests in Chicago to understand really what the strengths of Catholic schools were, because there are many strengths of Catholic schools in Chicago, and trying to understand how we could leverage those strengths to address the extraordinary challenges that we face. And we developed a strategic plan that we hope over the course of the next 5 years, and hopefully eventually over the course of the next 50 years, will strengthen Catholic schools in the Chicago area. And the plan really focused on identifying the schools that were performing the best and doubling down on those schools, making sure that our flagship schools remain strong and stay strong and we can grow from them. Second, on really improving the governance of our schools, making sure that all schools are implementing best practices, using all of the best techniques that we know can be effective. And third, focusing on making sure that we have an extraordinary leader in the form of an extraordinary priest and an extraordinary principal leading every single school, because we know that leadership matters a tremendous amount in improving the quality of our schools. And so what I learned from this process, what I thought was really extraordinary, was that I had the opportunity to take all of the skills I'd learned in the private sector and really apply them in the nonprofit sector. And I would have never had the opportunity to do that. I would have never had the knowledge or the skills or the ability to try to make a difference with something I really care about, which is the Catholic Church, had I not learned all of these skills in a very, very different context. And so during this time, a few things have really stuck out to me as I think about my career and all the things that I've learned from it. Let's see if we can get this to work. And the first is that, from a professional perspective, when I left college, I thought that I was really hot stuff. And it was only years later that I realized that at that time I knew next to nothing, and I still know relatively little, and I have so much to learn. But it was only by actually having a place that really invested in me that I was able to gain the skills that I had in the private sector to really make a difference. And it was also only through the work of extraordinary mentors that I was able to learn any of those skills that I have today. And then on a personal level, through all of that time, through all of the work that I was doing, both the highs and the lows, really the only thing that kept me going were the extraordinary relationships and the extraordinary community that I had. And that all really started for me in a big way at Notre Dame, where I developed such extraordinary relationships and actually was confirmed a member of the Catholic Church as a junior. And so I look back at my time here and I'm so extraordinarily grateful for all of the things that I've learned then, all of the things I've had the chance to learn in the years since, and for the opportunity to work with organizations that I really care about. Thank you very much.